If she had to save something out of her house that was on fire, she picked two things, but then we thought about it, and the second one made more sense. The first thing she chose was a Mars meteorite that she has, but then she thought, well, if the house is on fire and this thing has survived flying from Mars to here, it's probably going to be okay. So she has an actual animation cell from Snow White of Grumpy. A pencil animation thing. Pirates versus ninjas, again, without hesitation, she said pirates. And the most important question, pie or cake, she said pie, preferably pecan. Excellent. So please welcome, her talk is called Medical Nonsense, Angie Mattke. Yay.
Thank you. Hello. I'm Angie Mattke, as you have already discovered. I'm a MD, and FACEP is a professional designation for emergency physicians. So first, there's nothing up there, it's just me. I'm less interesting. Here. Huh? Oh, there we go. Okay, so first, conflict of interest. I'm a tool of the medical industrial complex. So expect that my stuff is going to be from that perspective. I'm board certified in emergency medicine. I'm human, so I make mistakes. All the images are stolen shamelessly for educational purposes from the internet. And I'm a doctor, but I am not your doctor. If you have specific medical questions, please see your doctor, and none of this constitutes medical advice. So the main categories I'm going to talk about include alternative systems such as homeopathy, Ayurvedic, traditional Chinese medicine, biologic-based modalities, vitamins, herbs, foods, dietary supplements. I'm not really going to have a whole lot of time to get into those today. Things like energy, Qigong, Reiki, therapeutic touch, mind-body things such as meditation and prayer, which I'm also probably not going to get into today, and things like manipulative, chiropractic, and acupuncture. But you know, as far as the energy-based medicines go, I would agree. I would actually argue that all but the biologic-based things are energy-based, and they rely on the existence of some sort of unverified and unverifiable energy, and they seem like mostly sort of vitalist at their core. And this list is by no means exhausted. There are dozens of others, but they all seem to fall into these main categories. So we're going to define some terms. So first of all, we're going to talk about evidence. So we need to know that something is scientifically plausible. It should not violate principles of physics. It should be reproducible. And it should be falsifiable. I mean, this is kind of the foundations of the scientific method, right? So there are levels of evidence, and they range from a systematic review to expert opinion. The expert opinion is less weighty than the systematic review, which does an extensive, exhaustive study of the literature, but sometimes there just isn't that as an option. And this does not include anecdote, right? Because the plural of anecdote is not data, it's anecdotes. So there are caveats to the literature, however. So there is, of course, a publication bias. Mostly positive studies get published, and the refutation studies are rarely published. They also don't often publish the reproducing studies. If an advocate for a particular therapy funds the study, you're going to tend to get positive results. And sort of famously, there are no positive studies that come out of China for acupuncture. No negative studies that come out of China for acupuncture. All of the studies coming out of China for acupuncture are positive studies. The type of study is important too. The randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial is the thing you really want. And sometimes that's not, is that me doing that? Sorry. So sometimes that's not reasonable to expect. Some things you just can't get a big enough population, and you have to do other sorts of trials. And you have to realize that there are going to be limitations either way. And so studies can be overpowered or underpowered to actually enough to show that there may be some magnification of data, so it may look like you have a positive result when really there isn't one. Error is one of the things that you can find in that. And then, of course, there's journalistic integrity. Scientists unfortunately, are human as well, and they will sometimes falsify their results. We try not to let that happen. So placebo, of course, is one of the things we'd really like to see. This is actually a real rock band named Placebo. I didn't realize that. I thought that was kind of cool. So there might be a real placebo effect. It's difficult to sort that out, though, between confirmation bias, reporting bias, things like that, and outright lies. Sometimes patients just lie to us, and we don't want them to, and we would like them not to, but sometimes they do. And it is very difficult to separate an actual effect from bias. And the placebo effect actually does depend significantly on expectations. So our challenge is to separate the placebo effect from an actual effect of the thing under control. Anybody remember the Andy Griffith show with it always stuck with me that Emma, the old lady in Mayberry, she wanted her pills, and Ellie was a brand new pharmacist, and Ellie knew that the doctor had been prescribing Emma's pills, and they were placebo. They were sugar pills. And Ellie said, "There's no reason for you to get these pills because they're placebo, or they're just a sugar pill." And of course, Emma went, she just has the worst time of it. And I used to have the video, but I can explain it a lot faster. Anyway, and so when Ellie finally caved and said, "All right, here are your pills," and Emma miraculously got better the moment she popped one. So, we see this in the popular culture and everything. And the expectations determine your results. So if you change your perceptions, the results are different. So there was a paper back in 1955 by Harry Beecher in the Journal of American Medical Association that was called The Power of Placebo. And that's sort of where we got most of our information regarding placebos. And it talks about all of these things. The cost makes a difference. The color of the pill makes a difference. How many times a day you take makes the difference. Anyway, and people do have a real response to, or they have a response to sugar pills. Nocebo effects also happen. We have negative effects appearing because people expect negative effects, which is why hypochondriacs should never read the inserts in the pills. They drive me crazy. They're so sweet. Bless their hearts. So anyway, I mentioned Vitalism a little earlier, and this is sort of the overview. It's the position where everything there has this living and non-living things. The difference is sort of a vital force in them. It's been described as the humors of blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. The four temperaments, sanguine, choleric, melancholic, phlegmatic, are associated with these. And Tim LaHaye has actually resurrected some of these things in some of the books. And this is relevant because a lot of the alternative medicine philosophies employ some permutation of this philosophy. So energy is another term that we need to define. Now, in physics, energy is the capacity to do work. That's it. E equals mc squared. Where's Brian? Is he in here? Dang it, I was quoting him. So when you hear the word energy used in a spiritual or paranormal sense, substitute the phrase measurable work capacity. Does it still make sense? If not, then it's probably nonsense. So illness progression is another thing that people fail to take into account. Most illnesses are self-limiting. There is a waxing and waning course. They often will regress to the mean, meaning that if you have bad days, you have good days, and eventually you kind of have a mean sort of existence of that chronic condition. People often seek assistance when they are on their worst days, and so they begin to get better after they've tried some intervention, and they assume that the intervention is what made them better, when probably they would have gotten better anyway. And of course, I've listed that fallacy there, the post hoc ergo propter hoc. And also there's the confirmation bias that we mentioned before. And also we make misdiagnoses. We try not to, but sometimes it happens. If something is misdiagnosed, then you get some treatment for your cancer, which wasn't really a cancer in the first place. That doesn't mean that your cancer was miraculously cured. It means you didn't have cancer in the first place. I love the snake oil, old snake oil things. Uh-oh. Yeah, okay, so it relieves instantaneously. If you see this, that's highly unlikely. And it cures headache, neuralgia, toothache, earache, backache, swelling, sprain, sore chest, swelling of the throat, contracted corns and muscles, cords, excuse me, cords and muscles, stiff joints, wrenches, dislocations, cuts, and bruises. Most things that claim to do all of that probably don't. So homeopathy, this is kind of low-hanging fruit. Everybody knows about homeopathy? So it was invented by Samuel Hahnemann, who was a German physician. He was dissatisfied by the contemporary medicine at the time. Now, he was a physician, but he had 2 years of medical study. Now, I'm about 11 years postgraduate study. That includes 4 years of medical school, 4 years of residency, and I've been in practice for 11 or 12 years at this point. And there still, all I know is kind of my specialty, and I don't even really know everything. I mean, you just kind of do the best you can to keep up. So he was translating a text that Sinchonbark treated malaria. Now, we knew this. We've known this for centuries because it contains quinine. And he began to experiment on himself to see if he would have any kind of effect from just trying this stuff. Well, it began to cause some effects, predictably, because effective medications cause effects, even if you don't have the illness that they're meant to treat, and even if you do. And so he began to experience shaking chills and generalized malaise and feeling very hot, and malaria, of course, causes very high body temperatures. And so when a healthy individual took this medicine, it caused similar reaction to the actual disease that the medicine is to cure. And so he deduced that like cures like. That's the origin of that like curing like. So he started to dilute the concentration down, and as he did that, he began to have fewer and fewer symptoms, which is reasonable because we have a dose-response curve. Now, I have actually seen a patient with Synchonism, which is the name of this condition that he had. It's an overdose of quinine. I saw one about a year ago. We still use quinine in some limited cases. And it causes the shaking chills, the generalized malaise, the not feeling good, things like that. And so as he cut down the dosages, he realized, well, I'm feeling better. And so that's how he came up with his dilutional hypothesis. The successive magical shaking up of the drop of the thing in a fixed volume of water, and then you dump out the water without replacing the drop of the thing, and then you put more water in, and you do that a certain number of times. So by the time you've diluted to the effective quantities in the homeopathic remedies, you may have done that 30 times. You would have to have the volume of the universe, or at least the solar system, to have a single molecule of the item that you're trying to obtain. So that just doesn't make any sense, right? So I like this quote from Shiloh Madsen. If homeopathy is real, then dumping Osama bin Laden's corpse in the ocean has just cured the world of terrorism. So, I just love that. I think that's great. It violates physics. I mean, that's a problem. We got issues. Neil Tyson would come after you. And do a mic drop. Did y'all see that? That was awesome. So the dose-response curve is a thing. We have to have that. You do get toxicity at high doses. And, of course, it's safe. It's water. It is water. So it's a waste of money, a waste of time. One of my favorite, not favorites, but one of the stories that I like about this homeopathic, and I have patients who sometimes bring in homeopathic remedies, and I try to explain very understandingly, there's no way possible you could have known that this doesn't work, because they spend a lot of money trying to get you to know, or trying to get you to use this. So oscillococcinum you'll commonly see as a flu remedy. And does anybody know the story behind oscillococcinum? No? Yay! Okay, so back in the big flu epidemic of 1918, there was a physician, a homeopathic physician, who was taking the blood samples from the flu patients and looking at them under a microscope. Well, unfortunately, we didn't really have much treatment for the flu at that time. We still kind of don't. But we didn't really understand viruses at that point either. So we were looking for a causative thing that would cause people to become so deathly ill. And when he looked on his slide preparations, there were these little wiggly round things that were on the slides. And he said, hey, these are present on every one of these flu patients' blood specimens. But he didn't actually do a control to look at specimens from non-ill patients and to compare. And it turns out these are artifacts of preparation. And he named them the Latin name, Oscillococcineum. Oscillo meaning wiggly back and forth, and coccinium, little round things. So that's literally what Oscillococcineum is. Well, he had deduced that since he is homeopath, that diluting these little wiggly round things and giving them to flu victims, you can cure their flu. He found the highest concentration of these little wiggly round things in the preparations of the liver and heart of the Muscovy duck. So when you look, if you find a box of this, which at the store where I saw it was $23 for little wiggly round things, right? So he went. If you look on the label, it says, basically, this is heart and liver of the Muscovy duck, except that it says it in Latin, so that you are convinced that it is a thing. Anus is duck, hepatis is liver, and cordis is heart. So I swear, if you Google it, it's there. Anyway, and it's a 200 dilution, which tells you there's really literally nothing in it. So anyway, I just love that story, though. All right, so Ayurveda is an Indian oral tradition of medicinal treatment. It's between 2,000 and 5,000 years old. It was reassembled from oral stories and traditions by the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in the 1980s. And Deepak Chopra loves this. He is the current deacon of this. And this means that this originated before a real understanding of chemistry, physics, biology, and the invention of the number 0. Okay, so there is a wide divergence of practice, and it stresses the balance of the 3 elemental substances, the vata, the pitta, the kapha. Forgive my Hindi is not what it used to be. And the ancient form included surgery, herbs, prayer, meditation, and diets. Now, this is vitalism. Who doesn't recognize vitalism in this? And there's no evidence that these things really exist. Now, they did do some surgeries that were very similar to some of the surgeries we do today. There are some relevant things that are helpful in this tradition, and certainly things that we should look into. So the categories are obvious, well-established preventatives. Eat in moderation. Relax. Take some time for yourself. Those are really important things for you to do. Opium was actually part of this tradition, and it's very helpful for pain relief as well as some other things. Of course, now we're dealing with massive addictions. But anyway, so there are things that can work, herbal remedies and such. There are the ludicrous and absurd, potentially dangerous things. So, for example, the ludicrous things include scraping your tongue, brushing your teeth, scraping your tongue, spitting in a cup of water, and washing your eyes for a few minutes with this mixture. Don't do that, please. Don't do that. If you like amulets and spells, this is probably what you would enjoy. We do use some of these things, but a lot of it's just ridiculous. Some of the problems that we have found with the Ayurvedic, besides it not working, studies in 2003 and in 2008 showed about 20% of the products were contaminated with excess, well, I don't know if it was contaminated, it might have been intentional, but contained excess amounts of lead, mercury, and or arsenic. So there is a risk of taking some of these medications. You could have missed diagnosis, missed opportunities. Those are not good. There is no evidence that the stress reduction techniques really do that much, but boy, it feels good, right? I mean, why not do them? There have been reports of lead poisoning. Infant colic preparations have poisoned infants. It's empty promises in pretty packaging, unfortunately. And when things work, we call it medicine. Of course, let's see, I think it was the Ayurvedic tradition. No, it was the Chinese. Okay, yeah. I'm getting ahead of myself. So they're about the 2,000 years of the folk remedies, and Brian actually did a really good job, 100% on the summation of traditional Chinese medicine. So this qi, or the vital life force, circulates through these 12 meridians, and so things like the Qigong masters would heal with the energy from their fingertips, etc. They use the acupuncture points along this way, and I'll talk more about acupuncture in a minute. but it includes the deep breathing techniques, the concentration, things that really can be helpful. Unfortunately, the meridians are not proven to exist. The original Chinese doctors were not allowed to actually dissect patients, so they really kind of didn't know what people looked like on the inside. So they speculated that there must be these 12 lines of force running through the body like there are 12 rivers in China. And the number of acupuncture points are about 360, which is roughly the number of days in the year. So there must be 360 acupuncture points. And that's sort of the basis of the medicine, the treatments, which is not very useful. A lot of it does include examination of the tongue and the pulse. You can tell a lot about the patient examining their tongue and their pulse, but you can't tell everything, and you miss a lot of things. Now, there was a very important thing that did come out of traditional Chinese medicine. Tu Yu, I swear that's her name, she developed a treatment for malaria from this tradition, artemisinin. Unfortunately, we are seeing some resistance to it, but it is something that came out of it. She won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2015. It's a huge breakthrough. And so this is why some of these things do need to be studied. Don't dismiss the entire canon. You do need to study the things, but when it's shown that it doesn't work, then there's no point. So this was just a kooky website that I found that it uses a lot of the sciencey sounding terms that you'll see in a lot of these alternative practices, promotional materials. And it talks about, at the very bottom, this is meant to enhance any treatments that you may be receiving from your actual doctor. So I say don't waste your time and money on it. So here we go. Here's acupuncture. So it can actually be, you may discover that this is decoupled from the mystical parts of traditional Chinese medicine. The needles are inserted into the skin along meridians, and sometimes they employ moxibustion, where they set aflame some herbs or something on the top. And sometimes they use electric terminals attached to the needles themselves. My mother's dog, she went and got acupuncture. Yeah, anyway, so we had a little chat, but I was actually there for one of them, and my mother swears it helped the dog's arthritis, but I was watching, and the vet was very soothing and pet the dog, and there were, the needles, and it wasn't flame, it was electroacupuncture. And the dog maybe got a little better for a few minutes and then was back to herself, so it probably doesn't work. Madsen et al. Did a study in 2009 that did a systematic review and a meta-analysis of 13 trials for pain and actually for pain conditions, which is the most subjective of the conditions. All of these studies were unblinded. One trial was excluded as a clear outlier, but there was no statistically significant difference between acupuncture and sham acupuncture, which kind of cracks me up because it's the placebo versus placebo. So they were both slightly better than no acupuncture. But funny, everybody improved some. I like that. Even the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons does not recommend acupuncture. And if you know that orthopods aren't recommending it, it sucks. Don't do it. And this is repeated study after study. This is the British Medical Journal. So there are some dangers, right? There are some real dangers besides becoming pinhead. You don't want the infection. Many of them do not employ sterile technique or anything to help prevent infection. Both cellulitis kind of infection, where you get infection up under the skin, and things like hepatitis, HIV, other kind of virally transmitted diseases. People pass out when you poke them with needles sometimes, and if you fall and hit your head or things like that, then you got a problem. You don't want bleeding. Don't hit a blood vessel. They can drop a lung. That's called a pneumothorax, is where the lung collapses. People die from that. Don't do that. Endocarditis is an infection of the lining of the heart, which is another no-no. You don't want that either. You can be obsessed with your acupuncture and miss the real diagnosis. And it's expensive. It's really expensive. So the shop, I got this to my house. This is actually something sent to me. These classes were almost $15,000. Now, I would have gotten 600 hours of credit for continuing medical education. I don't know if that was sanctioned by the American College of Emergency Physicians, but I just found that astonishing that they are shaking people down for that kind of money. And then I meet doctors who are absolutely convinced that this is real, and it's so hard to educate a person who is already very educated because they can construct very elaborate defense mechanisms. So, who watched the Olympics? Who saw the great big hickeys that looked like people got attacked by the Kraken? You saw that? Okay, well, so this was heavily featured in the 2016 Olympics, and the athletes love crazy stuff like this. So the claims range from they accelerate the healing, increase the blood flow, draw out toxins, decrease pain. So can it do any of these things? No. There may be, this is what it looks like. And then I didn't even put in the picture of necrotic skin from the blood pooling under there and dropping the blood flow to the skin itself, and the skin just can't heal. I mean, it's horrible. It doesn't disgust me because, but it's not safe for prime time. So, none of those things are true, unfortunately. I wish I had another treatment for chronic pain conditions, things like that, but unfortunately, no. So, here's another one that made the rounds in the Olympics, the Kinesio tape. It was invented in 1979 by this dude right here, Kenzo Case, Dr. Kenzo Case. Who can guess what kind of a doctor he is? Chiropractor, who got it? Yes, indeed. So, he was also a licensed acupuncturist and a moxibustion therapist. So he realized that manual therapy, like massage therapy, chiropractic care, and physical therapy, was extremely effective for treatment of different ailments. Really, I would say probably the physical therapy was the most effective. They were often temporary, which means it wasn't really effective. It was a temporarily making you feel better kind of thing. He wanted something that his clients could use between the appointment sessions to increase the efficacy of manual therapy for lasting results. And so he invented these things. So then it showed up in the U.S. in 1995 and then Europe in 1996. So it's been around for over a decade. And it was very popular in 2008 and 2012. The study that they did took 30 healthy subjects, and then after they applied the Kinesio tape to their abdomens, they had increased range of motion. Well, who has seen Richard Saunders' range of motion demonstrations with the power bands? Probably most people have seen that. I mean, when you repeat the gesture, you're going to get a bigger range of motion. So it's not hard to imagine how they did their range of motion studies. It's useless. Now, you can use it as real athletic tape. Then it would be effective. If you're using it to stabilize a joint, of course, it has to go all the way around the joint. It can't just be sitting along the line, in pretty lines and everything. So I love it that this dude's arm's just completely blowing up. I mean, like, what tape's going to hold that together? That's fantastic. I just love that. That's my daughter, and her coach, her basketball coach, put this cute little design. It looks like McDonald's arches on there. So, yeah, it does nothing, unfortunately. So it's more snake oil. So Reiki. It was invented by Mikao Usui in 1922, who was a Buddhist monk. And I don't think he has a whole lot of specific personal writings. I think it was all done in sort of a biography sort of method. And the biographies that I've seen on him speculate about his psychic abilities and things like this. So his idea was that the transfer of universal energy through the palms is how you heal. The traditional Japanese Reiki was the intuitive hand placement, and then the Western Reiki was the systematic hand placement. And the idea is to promote self-healing and a state of equilibrium. Well, as we saw earlier, there is regression to the mean. There are lots of reasons why people may feel better after this treatment. And Dr. Oz loves this, and I hate that guy. So, systematic review of 205 studies, did I say that out loud? Found that 9 randomized controls trials actually met inclusion criteria. 9 of 205 studies. None of these showed benefit. So since Reiki therapy is not compatible with either Christian teaching or scientific evidence, it would be inappropriate for Catholic institutions such as Catholic healthcare facilities and retreat centers or persons representing the church such as Catholic chaplains to promote or to provide support for Reiki therapy. And this was the Committee on Doctrine of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops in 2009. Just let that irony sink in for a minute. And I'm generally a fan when they oppose something, but I got to agree with them on this one. So, naturopathy. This is one you'll hear a lot about. It's a vitalist belief. And they say things like holistic. All medicine is truly holistic. We take things into account. So a couple of years ago, I had my first patient who told me that my very first patient who told me that her primary care doctor was a naturopath. I was horrified, absolutely horrified, that this person did not actually understand or care about science. So this map, wherever it went, that map, red states did not require a license to practice, red states require a license to practice naturopathy. The blue states do not require a license to practice it, and Tennessee and South Carolina do not allow the practice. I gotta say thumbs up on Tennessee and South Carolina there. So, what's that? Yeah, Kansas and DC require registration, which I guess is different than licensure. So the mission is naturopathic medicine is a distinct method of primary health care, an art, science, philosophy, and practice of diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of illness. Naturopathic physicians seek to restore and maintain optimum health in their patients by emphasizing nature's inherent self-healing process, the vis medicatrix naturae. This is, my Latin is rusty as well as my Hindi. So this is accomplished through education and the rational use of natural therapeutics. This sounds great. These are all laudable goals. You really want this, except, and including the healing powers of nature, which is what that Latin includes. And this is also very vague. And of course, the naturalistic fallacy is just leaping off the page, I'm sure. I love Harriet Hall's quote. The things naturopaths do that are good are not special, and the things they do that are special are not good. It is rooted in vitalist philosophy. It fixates on the immune system, even for cancer, and there is maybe some component to cancers. You know, of course, it's not this great big monolithic beast, but it does. There may be some immune system function in cancers, and it also creates or promotes that the mind can enhance the immune system, and they love enemas. Oh my goodness, they love enemas. So many of the recommendations they make are good recommendations. Exercise, eat healthy. Inexplicably, they still fixate on the enemas, and coffee enemas are adored among this population to detoxify and cleanse. I did have a patient who swore, if I don't get my coffee enema, I have such a headache. I'm like, honey, you can just drink it and you will be fine. Anyway. So this is another one of the old snake oil treatments. This one actually contains oil of wintergreen. Does anyone know what that has in it, or what oil of wintergreen is? Not a little touch of it. Salicylic acid. It's actually can be, yes, aspirin, right. It's in such a high dose, though, that just a tiny amount of this can kill a child. So, yes, so keep the oil of wintergreen away from the kids. It's 1 teaspoon of 98% methyl salicylate contains 7,000 milligrams of salicylate, the equivalent of nearly 90 baby aspirins and more than 4 times the potentially toxic dose for a child who weighs 10 kilos. It's a big deal. So don't give kids oil of wintergreen. Okay, chiropractic, invented by D.D. Palmer on September 18th, 1895 in Letts, Iowa. And was expanded upon greatly by B.J. Palmer, his son. It was originally, he imagined that he had cured the hearing of a janitor by adjusting his neck. And so he came up with, he was searching for this root cause of all disease. Now, he had tried magnets and phrenology, among other things, and I think at some point he was run out of town for practicing medicine without a license, but I'm not sure exactly when that occurred on his timeline. I think it was before he invented chiropractic. So BJ took over the school that Dee had founded. And I thought it was interesting that he bought the radio station locally, WOC, in Davenport, Iowa, and promoted chiropractic as well as giving local reports for sports, weather, et cetera. And B.J. Palmer gave a young Ronald Reagan his very first job. He was hired as a sportscaster and got paid $5 to go to see football games and report on the football games. That was cool. So one of the more mainstream alt-med practices, the first licensing battle happened in California. In 1916, there was a licensing movement when there was a chiropractor that was jailed, and the California chiropractors had adopted a slogan, go to jail for chiropractic. So 450 were jailed for practicing medicine without a license. And they would do adjustments in jail. They would, Well, and like one woman was on a 10-day hunger strike and passed out. But by then, of course, the public sympathy had swung in the chiropractor's favor. And so they were legislated into practice in 1922. So that is how medicine is performed now, apparently, by referendum. In 1976, 5 chiropractors brought suit against the AMA and a few other organizations. Now, for those of you who are not aware, the AMA is a political organization. We don't get licensure from them. We don't get any of that stuff. Most of us are not even members. Anywhere between 11 and 17% of doctors belong to the AMA. I think we're down to about 11%. Most of us are members of our specialty society, and until very recently, an emergency physician was the president of the AMA, and I did temporarily rejoin while he was the president. So, I don't know, I'm still getting letters. I may or may not rejoin, we'll see. But the point is that the AMA does not determine medical practice. So the chiropractors brought suit against the AMA. They do publish JAMA, which is a good journal, journal. So, but the American College of Radiology and the American College of Surgeons and the AMA were found, and a couple of other people, were found to be in violation of the federal antitrust laws. And so there was a permanent injunction against them, and they had to publish the judgment in JAMA. In 1990, the U.S. Supreme Court let this decision stand without comment, and so they just had to kind of give that one up, unfortunately. And in fact, chiropractors just got licensing at one of the hospitals where I practice. Yeah. So the hypothesis is that there are these subluxations of the spine which impinge on the nerves, and that this impingement interferes with the nerve flow or the innate life force. Does that sound familiar? Adjustment of the spine is supposed to relieve this interference. And these pains that they're pointing out here, I'm betting all of us have had this at some point. So there was a schism back early in the invention of chiropractic where the straights would maintain the original innate intelligence sort of pathway. And then there was another group who started to speculate, well, we should probably confine our practice to musculoskeletal issues. And they blend in other modalities many times, including homeopathy, herbs, biofeedback, physical therapy, massage, ice packs, etc. And a couple of those things do work. Physical therapy works. Ice packs help. Massage helps. But predictably, it's very difficult to tell the difference between the two when you go to see a chiropractor. Subluxation is defined by the World Health Organization as a lesion or dysfunction in a joint. Oh, sorry, not World Health Organization, the chiropractic, is lesion or dysfunction in a joint or motion segment in which alignment, movement, integrity, and or physiologic function are altered, although contact between the joint surfaces remains intact. It is essentially a functional entity, which may influence biomechanical and neural integrity. That's all very sciencey sounding things for nothing. That means nothing. Medical definition, a real definition, is an incomplete or partial dislocation. That's pretty clear, and that's absolutely true. So if you start to adjust a spine that is otherwise in alignment, intact, you can cause strokes. There are arteries that run along the inside of in particularly in the neck, and if you tear one of those arteries, you can cause strokes in young people. Fracture, you can miss a diagnosis. You can have organ failure from the supplements given, and you pay money for unnecessary treatments. We don't have enough resources to be wasting money on stuff that doesn't work. So I actually had a patient who was paralyzed, I think because of chiropractic. Couldn't prove it. Don't know if his back pain was because of the thing that he ended up having or if it was actually just a regular, kind of aches and pains that we get from, back pain and then the chiropractor caused the injury. I can't prove that, but he became paralyzed in front of me in my department. So what do these have in common? There is no evidence. I wish. So they are scientifically implausible. They violate principles of physics. They are not reproducible. They are unfalsifiable. And what's the harm? You get delays in diagnosis. You get delays in treatment. You have one bad outcome from an ineffective treatment, and I think that's one bad outcome too many. And it costs a lot of money. It reliably empties your wallet, however. So how do you spot snake oil? It's very difficult sometimes without special knowledge. So you can look for pseudoscientific buzzwords: detoxify, cleanse, stimulate, support body systems. Those were the weasel words that they came up with that the FDA said, okay, you can say those. So, okay, but don't say it's going to actually cure or treat. And appealing to antiquity, used for centuries. You mean like before bacteria were discovered? Before they knew how to use a microscope? Yeah. Okay, and they often will bypass peer review, and they will often pitch directly to the public. To be scientifically literate is to empower yourself to know when someone else is full of bullshit. I love Tyson, man. I love me some Tyson. So the original snake oil, Stanley snake oil, was produced by Clark Stanley, the rattlesnake king, and it was tested by the U.S. government in 1916, and it was found to contain 1% fatty oil, presumed to be beef fat. It had some mineral oil in it, red pepper, turpentine, camphor, and this is similar to some of the capsaicin liniments. Now, none of the oil content was found to have been extracted from actual snakes. This government sued the manufacturer for misbranding and because it didn't contain any snake oil. I love that. And so soon it became synonymous with false cures. So $20 was his fine in 1916, and that's roughly $430 today. So, all right. So the Credible Hulk always backs up his rage with facts. So, any questions? Yes.
Let me remind everybody that a question starts with a question and not the phrase, I think, or one time this, or in my opinion. So think of it as a tweet, if that's possible. So who has a question?
In this group?
You ready?
I didn't ask Brian this question because I saved it for you, but what about aphrodisiacs, and the idea that rhino horns are good for you? I mean, in terms of the harm it does, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it murdered an entire species.
Right. But
So we have Viagra now. So
yeah, but you didn't mention it, and Brian didn't mention it.
no, I couldn't cover everything. But
Right, no.
What's that? I didn't hear. But used for centuries. Yes, of course. Well, it must work then. So yeah, no, unfortunately. Sorry, you're going to have to get your aphrodisiacs from somewhere else.
You mentioned capsaicin.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
Yes. Could you expand on it a little bit? Is
Well-
it not? Because they have these patches that you,
Mm-hmm.
and it
Well-
produces heat.
It does, and there is a soothing effect, and there is a gateway neural pathway in the spinal cord where you can get chemicals that get released to help inhibit pain signals, and most of those sorts of sensate sort of things like the icy hot, things like that. That's what they're relying on. Also, distraction techniques by having a thing on top of the skin can distract you from the sensation just on a mental, plus you're doing something about it. And so that often will lower people's perception of the pain. Well, when it's actual thermal heat, not just a sensation of heat, yes, it can have an effect. So, like, for example, on an acute sprain or an acute injury, you put actual cold on it, not icy hot. You need to put actual cold temperature on it. That helps with the decrease of the inflammation and decrease of the swelling and things like that. So that's for the first 24 to 48 hours, and then after that you can alternate ice and heat, and that will help protect you not only from frostbite from keeping cold on it, but you'll also stimulate the blood flow to the area by dilating the blood vessels, but at the same time you need to work on the constricting the blood vessels.
Here's one.
Given that you've said that placebos do work sometimes, and I've heard that active placebos that produce some symptoms but aren't efficacious for the disease, do you see any ethical use of placebo treatment for diseases in which there are no Western medical scientific cures?
I don't think you can avoid a placebo at all. I don't think you can avoid it because people form their expectations based on walking into a doctor's office. If the plants are dead, they're going to have a different set of expectations than if the plants are live in the waiting room. So I don't think you can possibly avoid the placebo effect. But whether or not it's a real effect, I was looking into it, and the deeper I look, the less there seemed to be. It seems to be a lot of reporting bias, confirmation bias, things like that, and of course the natural progression of illness as well. The goal of studies is to see, is this intervention better than placebo? So, because we already know there's a placebo thing happening of whatever origin, and presumably the people who have the placebo report, confirmation biases will tend to report the same, even if they're getting an actual treatment. So.
Yes. I'm wondering, with acupuncture, if you go back, more than a couple hundred years, how were they able to manufacture needles fine enough to put into somebody without it being like a nail?
That's
that
a good
takes some
question.
technology.
I don't know. I don't know how they did that. I don't know. Magic, I guess. I don't know.
This relates to the discussion of placebos and state of mind as a curative force. We know the mind is not separate from the body.
Wait, I'm sorry. Would you clarify what you mean by curative? Are you talking about cancer? Are you talking about depression? Are you talking about pain perception?
It came up on the screen in relation to cancer, but state of mind in general, general health. And I just wanted to ask you to comment on kind of the state of the art, if you will, about the relationship of the chemistry of the mind, neurotransmitters and so forth, and the body's response, so that the state of mind of a patient does or does not have an effect on their rate of healing. Are there studies that, because some of this is pretty cutting edge right now in terms of our understanding of these neurotransmitters and even how thought progresses and so forth. But in terms of state of mind and healing, I just want to ask you to comment on what we know or what we have actually studied or experimented.
Okay. Well, I don't know the absolute cutting edge of this, but I can tell you my perception of my understanding from my doing the research for this and talking to my patients and reading current literature is that people with a good attitude die just as fast as people with a bad attitude. They just suffer less because they have a better quality of life in the sense that they have more of a sense of, I don't want to say empowerment, but they tend to worry less about some things, and it just kind of makes their quality of life better in some respects. Doesn't mean their mobility is necessarily better, and if they have the same cancers, they still die at basically the same rate. The chemotherapy or whatever doesn't seem to work any better in one group than the other, but you may suffer less. And so I think that, does that address your question? Okay.
We have time for one more back here.
Okay.
So much pressure. The last question. So
Make it good.
Yeah.
No pressure.
For the practical reasons of this, I have friends that are chiropractors, and I have friends that are physical therapists, and I have friends that are just trying to find a way to get to grad school and make money. And it seems a lot easier to be able to go to chiropractor school and have a lot better income potential than a physical therapist. So how do you feel about a chiropractor that is a physical therapist in practice, just holds a license, and he will tell you or she will tell you that, okay, the voodoo stuff that they tell you is not true. This is what I'm doing, and you need to take this medication, and you need to consult with this doctor to make it work. Otherwise, you're just wasting your money.
That's actually a really good question. Because you've got the difference between intellectual integrity versus making the money where you can pay and feed your family. Yeah, that's a tough one right there. Now, your outlay initially is going to be a lot higher for chiropractic school as well. The physical therapy techniques are often employed by chiropractors with good result. Many would argue that they are practicing physical therapy without a license. However, the chiropractic licensure covers that. So how do I feel about it? I still think they're charlatans. I think we ought to pay physical therapists more, and I believe they're well-meaning in most senses, but their business model is not set up in a way that's truly conducive to patient care. That one's about chiropractic care, chiropractor care, not chiropractic care, if you see the distinction. So at least that's my opinion. That's my understanding of my opinion. So,
If you get a chance, ask Angie to tell you some stories from the emergency room. They're always fun to listen to. Round of applause for Angie Mattke. Yay.
thank you.
All right. Going along.